Political analyst, Professor Dirk Kotze. Dr. Kotze, well, Professor Dirk Kotze, very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to Daytime Update. Are the DA's leaders, its mayors in Gauteng, under attack?
I won't call it attack. I think what is happening is that there's very much a focus on the mayor of Tshwane and Randall Williams. He is certainly in a very tight spot. The other two, I don't think is in the same situation. We are also seeing it from the response from the coalition and the coalition management committee that's meeting on this, that they take it very seriously with respect to Tshwane. One should actually take into account that the DA is planning something similar for Nelson Mandela Bay, as well as eThekwini. It is apparently also in the pipeline. So the notion of motions of no confidence is for opposition parties possibly their strongest weapon at local government level, because it works quite often. At national and provincial level, it doesn't work so well. But at local level, it is certainly one of the weapons of the opposition in order to deal with situations which they feel they can't deal with in other ways.
Well, in Tshwane, the political parties, opposition parties, including the ANC, say what they're doing is trying to hold Mayor Randall Williams accountable over alleged corruption or interference, they say, in that unsolicited tender bid that would have seen the refurbishment of at least 2 power stations in the capital. Where is the line between holding a mayor accountable and what John Steenhuisen has now described as a backdoor attempt to get the ANC to run the metros again?
Well, I think there's a little bit of both, and from the different perspectives. From a DA perspective, obviously, they feel that they are under attack, and that is so. There's no question about it, and for good reason also. If there's sufficient substance in what has been the mayor is accused of, then it is necessary that the different parties, also within the coalition, must voice their opposition to it. You know, the idea of a coalition doesn't mean that all parties agree on everything. Because these parties, there is an agreement, and written agreement, that they are using as the basis for their cooperation, but it doesn't mean that the smaller parties must keep quiet if there's problems within the DA or the DA-led government. So I think it is a very vibrant situation that exists in coalitions. In Tshwane, it is 6 parties. In Johannesburg, it's 9 parties. In other places, it's also more or less 5 parties. That's sort of the core of the coalition. And it's any politician will tell you it's one of the most difficult formations that exist in order to manage. But it can work, and it works in many parts of the world. So I think what we need to understand is that how the tradition of coalition government over time is going to grow in South Africa into a situation where the differences are seen as actually, inverted commas, as normal and not necessarily as a crisis every time.
But if this is an ANC campaign against the Democratic Alliance, what does that say then about the other parties who've also said in Tshwane, for instance, that they believe something fishy has gone on with that unsolicited tender bid? And even in Ekurhuleni, where Steenhuisen says there are efforts afoot there as well, Joburg as well, and Mpopalatsi facing some threat, according to the DA. Does that mean that the other parties are that easily swayed in terms of who they choose to support?
Well, in the past, it did happen. You know, in the period 2016 to 2021, we've seen it in Johannesburg, how some of the coalition partners and small parties of the DA actually voted in favor of the ANC. So there, in recent history, there is examples, good examples, of where it happened. And I think, therefore, the ANC, as the main opposition party, as part of the opposition group, they are trying their utmost best in order to use this a mechanism or this weapon in their hands in order to do it. But it's perfectly legitimate. There's nothing that says this is an underhand, illegal type of tactic that they are using. It's part of our constitutional mechanisms and democratic mechanisms in the constitution and all the legislation. It is, in a sense, the way in which it is being used. Take, for example, the situation in Tshwane between 2016 and 2021, where they threatened one after the other motions of no confidence, and they never succeeded, or they ended up in stalemate situations. then it actually has a very negative impact on government in general. But if there's valid reasons for that, then a motion of no confidence is a perfectly legitimate political instrument that can be used by parties. I think the important point is it should not become so much used that it loses its impact. And I think that's the danger that exists in South African politics, is that motions of no confidence are tried at any point, and therefore its significance is very often lost, because it should only be done when there's indeed a loss of confidence in the leading person, whether it's a mayor or a president or someone else. And it should not be used at any point in time.
And Professor Kotze, John Steenhuisen in that briefing today said something else. He confirmed that the DA has set its sights on winning national government and running national government through a coalition come 2024. That's in 2 years from now. Can the party achieve that goal if it's unable to calm the storms at metro level?
Well, that's a totally different ballgame. You know, national politics and even provincial politics. The local government is some of the most stormy, unwieldy type of politics one can get. And because there's often very small parties and local parties involved, and that is what we are seeing in these coalitions, many of them also outside the metros, is very often made up of local parties. At national level, we will have to see how it's going to unfold. He mentioned two options, and that's a DA-led coalition versus an ANC-led coalition. There's obviously also the option, a third one, of an ANC-DA coalition, which he didn't mention, but which cannot be excluded at all. I think it's going to determine which of these parties have ultimately the most options in terms of coalition partners. The DA has now built a coalition over the years since 2016, first in the metros, and it is now going also into other areas of parties like the Freedom Front Plus, the IFP, Action SA, ACDP, and UDM, and sometimes COPE also, that form sort of the core of such a coalition. The ANC hasn't done that yet. They have smaller parties as coalition partners, and in the end, it's going to be basically a choice between which of these two main parties will be able to build as quickly as possible the biggest coalition. And that's going to determine on tactics, strategy, and leadership.
Professor Dirk Kotze, good to speak to you. Thank you.